ladies and gentlemen, Naim Edwards.
Just for the sake of clarity, I am not directly affiliated with Black Lives Matter. I'm just a black person who thinks Black Lives Matter. Happy birthday, Shay. And good evening. Thanks be to God. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Fall 2013, I sat at my graduate school lab desk and looked out over the activity of the University of Michigan's campus. And I was sitting at my computer working through a PhD application to UC Berkeley. I had spent the last 2 years studying how to manage urban gardens to support biodiversity and wildlife. And my fingers were just frozen at the keyboard. What was I doing for others? And I felt like it wasn't enough just being in school. So I decided I would finish with a master's and not move forward. The two greatest opponents to that decision were my college advisor, John Vandermeer, and my grandmother. And I can remember both of their reactions when I informed them. And John, he's almost 80 as well. He said, "The university system needs more black doctors. More black PhDs to educate people. Once you get a PhD, you can do whatever you want." I was like, I feel like I can do whatever I want right now. And my grandmother, she just kind of clasped her hands and winced, and she said, "Didn't I raise my grandson to be a doctor? You're supposed to be someone real special and successful. What are you gonna do?" I was like, I don't really know, but I'm gonna figure it out. And, you know, I decided that I would spend the last semester figuring out what I wanted to do. And while I was in graduate school, I had spent a good bit of time hearing about this so-called failed city of Detroit. And in the university, you get to go to a lot of seminars and lectures, and I had a lot of intellectual conversations about Detroit, and they went something like, "The city is currently experiencing high rates of disinvestment since the 1950s, and therefore blight has occurred in great rates all over the place." And what else do people say? "Gentrification is occurring in specific areas, forcing the poor out of their homes. And urban gardening is a great stimulus for youth engagement and micro-enterprise development." And the predominantly white students, staff and faculty also said things like, "The crime rates are so high, like never go there. And you know, you'll die, you'll get shot." And I'm thinking like, I'm black. And all I could really think about, the message I was really hearing was Detroit is better studied and discussed rather than engaged. And I felt like, I needed to go there. I felt called to share my light and my gifts in Detroit. And prior to graduate school, I had done 4 years at Morehouse College. And for those of you who don't know or aren't familiar with the school, Martin Luther King went to Morehouse College, and that quote, "Life's most persistent and urgent question," is one of my favorite questions of his. So what was I doing for others? I decided to move to Detroit, and I had figured out that Cap Corps was a wonderful opportunity to be able to go there. The Capuchin Corps is through the Catholic Church, and they pretty much ask you to give 1 year of service in Detroit and focus on servant leadership, social justice, and spirituality. Cap Corps also provided like just immediate security. It gave me a place to live, healthcare, and a car, and it was like God just made a way out of no way. So I moved to Detroit, and Cap Corps, just due to its principles, had immediately linked me into a network of social justice organizations and activists and people who do good work in the city. And a couple months in, I had gone to a We the People of Detroit meeting, and I got to hear Monica Lewis Patrick speak. And for those of you who don't know Monica, I would say that She is justice in human form, and she just embodies the conviction and the righteousness that most human beings need to make the changes that we really want to see in society. And Monica was talking about canvassing neighborhoods to build awareness around foreclosure, because people are experiencing really high rates of foreclosure in the city, and there are a lot of legal mechanisms in place that would allow them to stay in their homes that they're not privy to. That information is just not shared with them. And Monica often ends a lot of her talks with, whose city? And then we go, our city. And she says, whose streets? Our streets. Whose children? Our children. And I was just kind of sitting there like, hell yeah! But at the time, I was only in Detroit a couple months, and I just kind of sat there like, so I was like, I can't do that. A couple months later, a lot of other organizations, Detroit People's Water Board, Detroiters Resisting Emergency Management, had decided we would go to the one-year bankruptcy commemoration, which WDET was hosting at Wayne State University, which was this past December. And they essentially invited Stephen Rhodes, the judge who facilitated the bankruptcy, Mayor Mike Duggan, and Governor Rick Snyder to talk about how wonderful the 1 year post-bankruptcy had been. And they made it a public event, and they pretty much just brought these three men who are most responsible for a lot of the water shutoffs and housing foreclosures right into our hands. So pretty much from start to finish, we're hissing and we're booing and we're yelling at them liar! And they're like, what the heck is going on? But after about 30 minutes, our energy kind of subsided, or you were kind of getting tired of it, and the program seemed to be going on as normal. And I was sitting behind one of my friends, Antonio, and Antonio kind of looked over his shoulder and he sent me a text message. He's like, yo, we need to shut this down. And I texted him back, I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, we need to make sure this event ends right now. And I was like, things seem like they're going pretty fine and normal. One thing about Antonio is when he was an undergraduate, he was born and raised in Detroit. His family lost their home that he was raised in to foreclosure. So he takes a lot of the issues in Detroit very personally. So he's really courageous and intense about it. And I'm just like, I just got here, man. I was like, what do you want me to do? And Antonio's like, stand up and yell into the crowd until you get kicked out or arrested. And I was like, I don't really know why that's necessary. And he's like, look, these men are trying to record a happy story about Detroit's renaissance and Detroit coming back and pat themselves on the back and say, here, Detroit is saved. We're not going to let them do that. Put it on the internet, put it on the radio. We're shutting it down. And I was like, okay. I was like, how about you go first? And then when Mayor Mike Duggan comes out, I'll yell at him. And then he kind of looked over his shoulder again and he's like, watch this. And he packs up his bags. He stands up and he's like, Stephen Rhodes, you're a liar. The same thing you did in Detroit, you're now doing in Puerto Rico. You've cut pensions, you've ruined lives, you've ruined our schools, you've privatized everything. You suck. And then the moderator was like, shut up, stop it. And he's standing in the middle of the audience, and now he has everybody's attention. And he kind of ran out of things to say, but he kind of kept ranting and speaking. He's like, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. And then 3 officers came down the aisle closest to him, and they just motioned, and he kind of took his book bag and scurried out. And at that moment, I just immediately began to pray. I was like, God, give me the courage to just say whatever is true and to be able to stand up and do the same thing Antonio just did and just work your way in my life, God, and don't let me get arrested. And there was, because of Antonio's disruption, like a delay in the programming. And about 3 minutes later, Stephen Henderson, the moderator of the event, came out and said, ladies and gentlemen, due to the disruption and the interruptions, we're going to cancel tonight's event. Mayor Mike Duggan has decided he doesn't want to come out to speak. So I was just like, praise God. But in order to celebrate, we went out to a bar after that, and I was feeling like, man, Antonio, he's the man, he's a boss. And we were celebrating that we shut the event down. And I was like, you know what? Next time we got a plan, to do something in 2016. And I was like, maybe we should plan something for the State of the City address. And everyone was like, yeah, it's a great idea. So 8 of us got together, and we met pretty much once a week at St. Peter's, a bunch of young black and youth of color between 20 and 30. And we figured out where it was going to be, what time it was going to be held, how to get in, what we wanted to say. And the group settled on we would all have individual disruptions and start our disruption with Shut Up Duggan. And then we would talk about LGBTQ rights, police brutality, emergency management, shutoffs to water, and foreclosure and evictions. And the day of the event arrived, and it was time. The adrenaline's pumping. I'm like, I'm actually gonna do something this time, maybe, sort of, kind of. And Antonio was gonna go first, but we found out that day that he had been charged with a felony for spray painting through the water on a water tower off the highway. So we were kind of worried about whether he would really get arrested that time. So we weren't sure if he was gonna go first or not. And in addition to that, he also lost his cell phone that day. So if we were spread out in the audience, it would be very difficult to contact him. So we get into the event and we take our seats. And 10 minutes into the event, nothing had happened yet, and Mayor Mike Duggan had started to speak. And I text the group, I'm like, if Antonio doesn't go in the next 5 minutes, I'm going first. And I was like, Antonio, you gotta go, man. So, 1 minute passes, 2 minutes pass, 3 minutes pass, I text the group, I'm like, I'm going in the next minute. And I just started praying again, and I was like, God, you want to shut this event down too? That'd be awesome, Lord. But if not, just give me the courage to stand up and speak the truth of power. Yeah. And I had Monica's name written on my hand, and I also had a rosary from Capcor in my pocket. And when there were about 30 seconds left, I just tucked my rosary away and packed up all my things, and I held up a sign that said a moratorium on water shutoffs and foreclosure. And I just stood up and I said, "Shut up, Duggan!" And then the mayor was in the center. He just froze and he shut up. And I was like, whoa. And then we were looking at each other. And then everyone else in the audience turned and they were looking at me too. And I was like, I had other things to say. I was like, God calls us to serve the poor. And he who is greatest among you should be your servant. Who do you serve? And I was like, John Hance and Mike Illich and Dan Gilbert, they're not God. And I was like, how is it in a city that is 40% in poverty, we can't figure out how to have programs to keep people in their homes, give them access to water? And then, I talked a little more, and then these two guys came down the aisle, and one of them tugged on my arm, and he was like, let's go, sir. And I was like, Black Lives Matter, all power to the people. And I was like, I gotta go. So as I was walking out, I heard a lot of applause, and I wasn't sure if people were clapping for me or clapping for the fact that I was being escorted out. And another thing is we had decided as a group to say, "Shut up, Duggan," because Detroiters have historically been silenced, those who have protested and tried to exercise their democratic rights. So we wanted to start with that. Shut up's kind of violent, but we decided to do that. Anyway, I'm getting escorted out, and I'm super worried. They're like, right this way. And I was like, and they say, go to the left. And I go to the left and I look up and one of the guys is just holding the door to the building open, and they're like, go out. And I was like, just go out? And they're like, yeah. And I put on my hat and my coat and I'm like, have a good evening. And they were like, yeah. So as I'm walking away, I'm like, yeah. And I like text the rest of the group, like the coast is clear, it's safe to go. Like everybody else can do their disruptions, and pretty much every 5 to 10 minutes throughout the rest of the event, Antonio went next. Adrian from Black Lives Matter, Dakari from BYP 100, Detroit Black Youth Program. And we all demonstrated within that space that not everybody is on board with Duggan's program and plans. And not everything is all about just disruptions and protesting. And I really look forward to continuing to ask myself, what am I doing for others? And I look forward to more civil disobedience and justice work in the future. Thank you. We'll be there. We'll join hands in solidarity, working for affordability. When water is threatened, we'll be there. We'll be there to organize with a message that is clear. Work for water rights around here.
We'll be there with a voice that's strong. We'll work with heart. We'll keep holding on. Yes, we will. Yes, we will.
Let us turn our tears to joy and laughter. Water for all is what we're after.
When water is threatened, we'll be there.
Everybody sing with us. We'll be there. We'll be there. We'll be there.
When water is threatened, we'll be there.
The Flowtown Review Choir.
Naim Edwards and party.